I freed a mysterious woman from the black market. Then she told me she was royalty. The rain drummed against the cobblestones of the Whispering Quarter, where legitimate merchants dared not tread after sunset. Marcus Chen pulled his leather jacket tighter as he navigated the narrow alleyways, his journalist instincts screaming that tonight's tip about human trafficking would either make his career or end his life. The warehouse loomed before him like a beast of rusted metal and broken dreams. Through grimy windows, he could see the auction floor where desperate souls were bartered like livestock. His camera hung heavy around his neck, evidence waiting to be captured, but something made him pause at a side entrance where two guards shared cigarettes in the drizzle. "The Valdorian girls bringing top dollar," one muttered in heavily accented English. "Royal blood always does." Marcus's blood ran cold. Valdoria, the small Eastern European kingdom that had been in political turmoil for months. He'd covered the civil war that had torn the nation apart, but reports of the missing princess had been dismissed as propaganda. Slipping past the distracted guards, Marcus found himself in a maze of holding cells. The stench of fear and desperation filled his nostrils as he moved deeper into the building's bowels. In the furthest cell, barely visible in the dim light, sat a young woman whose posture spoke of nobility despite her tattered dress. Her auburn hair fell in waves around her shoulders, and when she looked up, her emerald eyes held a fire that captivity couldn't extinguish. There was something regal about the way she held her chin, even in chains. "You're not one of them," she whispered, in perfect English, though her accent carried the musical lilt of Valdorian royalty. "Your eyes, they hold compassion, not greed." Marcus's heart hammered as he fumbled with his lock-picking tools, a skill learned during his investigative journalism days. "We need to move fast. Can you run?" She nodded, wincing as she stood. "I am Serafina Aldrich, and if you help me escape, I will ensure your bravery is rewarded beyond measure." The name hit Marcus like lightning. Princess Serafina, heir to the Valdorian throne, presumed dead in the revolution that had claimed her parents. As the cell door swung open, he realized this wasn't just a rescue. It was the moment that would reshape both their destinies. Alarms began blaring as they reached the main corridor. Shouts echoed behind them as Marcus grabbed Serafina's hand, pulling her toward the emergency exit he'd memorized. Her bare feet slipped on the wet concrete, but she matched his pace with determination that spoke of royal training. "This way!" Marcus shouted over the chaos, kicking open a fire door that led to the alley where his motorcycle waited. As Serafina climbed behind him, her arms wrapping around his waist, he felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. The side engine roared to life just as armed men burst from the warehouse. Bullets sparked off the alley walls as they raced into the night, leaving behind the market of shadows and stepping into a future neither could have imagined. In that moment, as rain whipped their faces and danger pursued them through the city, streets Marcus Chen, small-town journalist with big city dreams, became something more. And Princess Serafina Aldrich began her journey from captive to the woman who would reclaim her throne. The abandoned church on the outskirts of the city had served as Marcus's emergency hideout for 3 years of investigative work. As dawn broke through the stained-glass windows, casting colored light across the dusty pews, Serafina sat wrapped in his spare jacket, finally able to tell her story. 3 months ago, General Kozlov's forces stormed the palace, she began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "My parents, they died protecting the escape routes for the palace staff. I was supposed to flee to our allies in Switzerland, but Kozlov's men intercepted my convoy." Marcus handed her a cup of coffee from his thermos, watching as she cradled it like a lifeline, The morning light revealed the full extent of what she'd endured: bruises on her wrists from shackles, a thin scar along her collarbone, and eyes that had seen too much suffering for someone barely 25. "They kept me alive because dead martyrs are more dangerous than living prisoners," she continued. "Kozlov planned to parade me before the people, broken and defeated, to legitimize his rule. When that failed to crush the resistance, he decided I was worth more as a commodity than a symbol." "The resistance," Marcus leaned forward, his journalist instincts engaging. "Your people are still fighting." For the first time since their escape, Serafina smiled, a radiant expression that transformed her entire face. "My uncle, Duke Alexander, leads the loyalist forces from the northern mountains. They've held 3 provinces against Kozlov's army for months, waiting for proof that the royal line survives." She reached into the lining of her tattered dress, producing a small locket that had somehow escaped her captor's notice. Inside was a miniature portrait of a man in military dress and a woman in royal regalia, her parents, the last true rulers of Valdoria. "This is all I have left of them," she whispered. "But it's enough to prove my identity to the resistance leaders." Marcus studied the intricate craftsmanship of the locket, the royal seal etched in gold. Everything about Serafina's story rang true, from her knowledge of palace protocols to the way she unconsciously sat with perfect posture despite exhaustion. "What will you do now?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Return to Valdoria, reclaim my throne, free my people from Kozlov's tyranny." Her voice carried the steel of absolute determination. "But first, I need to contact the resistance and prove I'm alive." "That's suicide. Kozlov's people will be watching. Every border crossing, every airport. The bounty on your head will only grow larger with time." Serafina stood, moving to the window where she could see the city waking up in the distance. "Every day I remain in hiding. More of my people suffer under his rule. Children go hungry while he sells our national resources to the highest bidder. Political prisoners disappear in the night." Marcus joined her at the window, studying her profile as she gazed toward the horizon. There was something magnetic about her presence. Not just her beauty, but the way she carried herself with quiet authority, as if the weight of a crown was already on her head. "You saved my life last night," she said softly, turning to face him. "In Valdorian tradition, that creates a bond of honor between us. I would like to offer you something more than gold or titles." "What's that?" "The chance to witness history, to document the restoration of a kingdom, to be the journalist who tells the world how Valdoria rose from the ashes." Her eyes met his, and Marcus felt something shift between them, professional respect deepening into something more personal. "It would be dangerous," he said, though he was already calculating the story potential. The most important stories always are. Serafina's smile held promise and peril in equal measure. "What do you say, Marcus Chen? Will you help me reclaim my crown?" The freight train thundered through the Alpine passes, carrying them toward the Valdorian border hidden among shipping containers bound for Eastern Europe. Marcus had used his network of contacts to secure their passage, favors owed from years of protecting sources and exposing corruption. Serafina sat beside him in the cramped hiding space between crates of machinery, her hair now dyed black and cut short in a style that made her look like a university student rather than royalty. The transformation was remarkable, but Marcus found himself missing the way her auburn waves had caught the light. "Tell me about your family," she said during their second night aboard the train. The steady rhythm of wheels on tracks created an intimate cocoon around their whispered conversations. "Not much to tell. Middle-class family from Ohio. My parents run a hardware store. They think journalism is a phase I'll outgrow." Marcus smiled ruefully. "What about you? What was it like growing up in a palace?" "Lonely, mostly. Serafina drew, her knees up to her chest. Tutors instead of friends, protocols instead of playground games. My parents tried to give me a normal childhood, but normal doesn't exist when you're heir to a throne. Any regrets about the life you're choosing? She was quiet for a long moment, listening to the train's mechanical lullaby. I regret that I never learned what it felt like to be just Serafina, not Princess Serafina. Never went to university. Never fell in love without wondering if someone wanted me or my crown. Something in her tone made Marcus look at her more closely. In the dim light filtering through the container's vents, she looked younger, more vulnerable than the determined royal who had declared her intention to reclaim her kingdom. "What would you have studied?" he asked gently. "Literature, maybe, or journalism?" She glanced at him with a small smile. "I always admired people who could tell stories that mattered, who could shine light into dark places, like exposing human trafficking rings, like rescuing princesses from black market auctions." The train lurched as it took a sharp curve, throwing them together. For a moment, they were close enough that Marcus could see flecks of gold in her green eyes, could smell the faint scent of jasmine that seemed to cling to her despite everything she'd been through. "Marcus," she whispered, and something in the way she said his name made his heart race. "When this is over, when I've reclaimed my throne and secured my people's freedom, will you stay in Valdoria with me?" The words hung between them. Like a bridge, neither was sure they should cross. "I know it's selfish. I know I'm asking you to give up your life, your career." "Serafina." He reached out, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "You're not asking me to give up anything. You're offering me everything I never knew I wanted." The train whistle echoed through the mountains as they drew closer to their destination. Closer to the moment when Serafina would step back into her role as a princess, and he would become, what? Her protector, her chronicler, her partner in the most dangerous political gamble of the century. On their final night aboard the freight train, as the Valdorian mountains rose like ancient guardians in the distance, Marcus made his choice. He would follow this remarkable woman into whatever destiny awaited, because somewhere between the warehouse cell and this moment, he had fallen completely, irrevocably in love with her courage, her compassion, and her unwavering determination to save her people. The princess had become his North Star, and he would follow her light home. The mountain village of Krasnov appeared empty as they approached on foot, but Marcus's trained eye caught the subtle signs of hidden sentries, the glint of binoculars from a church bell tower, the way certain windows remained shuttered despite the beautiful autumn morning. Serafina walked beside him with growing confidence, her royal bearing reasserting itself with each step toward home soil. She had discarded her disguise during their final approach, allowing her natural auburn hair to catch the sunlight, transforming back into the princess her people needed to see. "Halt!" The command came in sharp Valdorian from a grove of pine trees. 6 armed fighters emerged, their faces weathered by months of guerrilla warfare. Their leader, a grizzled man with steel-gray eyes, lowered his rifle as recognition dawned. "Your Highness?" Colonel Victor Nemeth dropped to one knee, and his men followed suit. We feared you were lost to us forever." "Rise, old friend." Serafina's voice carried new authority, the accent of her homeland strengthened by emotion. "I have returned to reclaim what is ours." The reunion that followed was both joyous and sobering. In the Resistance headquarters, a series of connected mountain caves, Marcus witnessed the transformation of the woman he'd rescued. Princess Serafina studied tactical maps with seasoned commanders, reviewed intelligence reports about Kozlov's forces, and listened to heartbreaking accounts of her people's suffering under the general's brutal regime. "The situation is worse than we feared," Duke Alexander explained, as they gathered around a scarred wooden table. Serafina's uncle was a man carved from the same noble stone as his niece, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and radiating the quiet authority of born leadership. Kozlov has imprisoned over 3,000 political dissidents. Food shortages plague the cities, while he exports our grain to fund his war machine. And there are rumors. He hesitated, glancing at his niece with obvious reluctance. "Tell me," Serafina commanded. "He's negotiating to sell Valdoria's mineral rights to foreign corporations. In exchange for military support, he would essentially make our kingdom a puppet state." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus watched Serafina's face, seeing the moment when the last traces of the captive woman disappeared, replaced entirely by a queen-in-waiting whose people's freedom hung in the balance. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Intelligence suggests the treaty signing is scheduled for next week in the capital at the palace." Duke Alexander's expression was grim. "Once those contracts are signed, we'll be fighting not just Kozlov's forces but international military contractors. Then we strike before the signing." Serafina stood, moving to the large map of the kingdom spread across one wall. "A coordinated assault on the capital. We retake the palace, capture Kozlov, and present the people with their true queen." "Your Highness," Colonel Nemeth interjected carefully, "with respect, we have perhaps 800 fighters against Kozlov's 3,000 soldiers. The odds will improve dramatically once the people see that the royal line survives." Serafina traced the routes leading to the capital with her finger. "Marcus, you said you could get word to international media." "Within hours," Marcus confirmed, understanding her strategy immediately. "Live coverage of your return would make it impossible for Kozlov to claim victory, even if I die in the attempt." She turned from the map, her gaze encompassing everyone in the room. "My friends, my people have suffered long enough. I would rather die fighting for their freedom than live safely in exile while they remain enslaved." That night, as the resistance prepared for what might be their final battle, Marcus found Serafina alone on a mountain ledge overlooking the valley that held their homeland's capital city. The palace, her birthright, gleamed in the distance, like a jewel stolen from its proper setting. "Are you afraid?" he asked, settling beside her on the rocky outcrop. "Terrified," she admitted without hesitation. "But not of dying. I'm afraid of failing them, of letting my people down the way I let them down when I was captured." "You didn't let anyone down. You survived. You came back. You're giving them hope." She leaned against him, and for a moment she was just a young woman facing an impossible task, rather than a princess shouldering a kingdom's fate. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that meeting you, being rescued by you, it changed everything. You gave me back my life, and now I can give it meaning. Serafina, promise me something." She turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the stars above. "Promise me that if I don't survive tomorrow, you'll tell the world who we were, what we fought for. Make sure the story isn't forgotten." Marcus took her hands, feeling the calluses she'd developed during her captivity, the strength that had carried her through hell and back to this moment of reckoning. "I promise," he whispered, "but I'm making you a promise too. You're not going into that battle alone. Where you go, I go. Crown or no crown, your fight is my fight now." The assault on the capital began at dawn, with resistance fighters emerging from the morning mist like avenging angels. Marcus rode beside Serafina in the lead convoy, his camera capturing every moment as the people of Valdoria awakened to the sight of their true princess returning home. The reaction was electric. Citizens poured from their homes, some weeping, others cheering, all of them witnessing what many had believed impossible. The royal line had survived. Word spread faster than wildfire through the city streets. Princess Serafina lives. The crown returns. Kozlov's forces, caught off guard by the coordinated attack and the civilian uprising that followed, found themselves fighting on multiple fronts. The general had prepared for a military assault, not a popular revolution sparked by the return of a beloved monarch. "The palace gates!" Colonel Nemeth's voice crackled over the radio. "Your Highness, the ceremonial guard is laying down their arms. They're opening the gates." Marcus watched Seraphina's face as her childhood home came into view. The palace where she'd been born, where her parents had died, where she would either reclaim her crown or meet her fate. Her composure never wavered, but he saw her hands tremble slightly as she gripped the vehicle's door handle. The palace courtyard was chaos. Kozlov's loyal forces had barricaded themselves in the throne room, using it as their final stronghold. Resistance fighters took positions behind marble statues and ornate fountains. The beautiful space transformed into a battlefield. "Kozlov!" Seraphina's voice rang out across the courtyard, amplified by the palace's natural acoustics. She stood in the open, despite Marcus's attempts to pull her to cover, looking every inch the queen she was born to be. "Face me! Face the rightful ruler of Valdoria!" The palace doors burst open, and General Kozlov emerged flanked by his remaining loyalists. He was a harsh-featured man with cold eyes and the bearing of someone who had seized power through brutality rather than earning it through legitimacy. "The little princess returns," he sneered, his voice carrying the arrogance of assumed victory. "Did you enjoy your time in the slave markets? Perhaps you learned some humility during your education." "I learned that even in the darkest places, there are those who choose compassion over profit, justice over power." Seraphina stepped forward, and Marcus realized she was walking toward a confrontation that would determine not just her fate, but the future of an entire nation. "Surrender, Kozlov. Your men are outnumbered, the people have risen against you, and international media is broadcasting every moment of your defeat to the world." The general's laugh was harsh. "You think a few peasants with rifles can stand against a professional army? I have reinforcements coming, little princess, foreign allies who understand the value of Valdoria's resources. Reinforcements that will never arrive." Duke Alexander appeared at the palace entrance, holding official-looking documents. "The treaty you were planning to sign? It's been nullified. Our allies in the European Union have recognized Princess Seraphina as the legitimate ruler of Valdoria. Your foreign backers have abandoned you." Marcus watched the color drain from Kozlov's face as the reality of his situation became clear. Around the courtyard, his soldiers were laying down their weapons, unwilling to die for a cause that was already lost. "This isn't over," Kozlov snarled, but even as he spoke, Colonel Nemeth and his fighters were surrounding the general's position. "Yes," Seraphina said quietly, her voice carrying the finality of absolute authority. "It is." The arrest of General Kozlov was swift and decisive. As the usurper was led away in chains, the people of Valdoria flooded into the palace courtyard. They came not as subjects, but as citizens welcoming home their queen, for in that moment, watching Seraphina stand where her ancestors had ruled. For centuries, everyone present understood that she had transcended mere princesshood to become something greater. 3 days later, Marcus stood beside the throne as Seraphina was formally crowned Queen of Valdoria. The ancient crown, hidden by loyalists throughout Kozlov's regime, caught the light streaming through the great hall's windows as it was placed upon her head. "Your Majesty," the archbishop intoned, completing the ceremony that restored legitimacy to the realm, "may you rule with wisdom, justice, and compassion." As Queen Seraphina, I turned to face her people. Her eyes found Marcus in the crowd. In that gaze, he saw not just gratitude for the rescue that had started their journey, but something deeper, a love that had grown through shared danger, mutual respect, and the recognition of kindred spirits. Later, as the celebration continued throughout the capital and citizens danced in streets that had known only fear for months, Marcus found the new queen on the palace balcony, where she had often played as a child. "No regrets?" he asked, joining her as she watched her people celebrate their freedom. "Only one," she said, turning to face him with a smile that made his heart race. I regret that it took a human trafficking ring to bring us together. Well, Marcus said, pulling her close as fireworks lit the sky above the liberated kingdom. I've always been attracted to complicated women. Good, Queen Seraphina whispered against his lips, because ruling a kingdom is about to get very complicated, and I'm going to need someone I trust to help me navigate it all. Your Majesty, Marcus said with mock formality, I am at your service. Forever, forever. And in that moment, as the freed kingdom celebrated around them and the stars shone down on a restored monarchy, Marcus Chen, the journalist who had followed his conscience into a warehouse of horrors, realized that sometimes the greatest stories don't just change the world. Sometimes they change the storyteller too.